We had discussed development of the face and nose and the lip. So we had said that on the frontonasal process, there are this medial nasal process and lateral nasal process. These two medial nasal process unite to form the philtrum. So philtrum is developed from frontonasal process, but its nerve supply is from maxillary nerve. Why? Because philtrum develops like this. Two maxillary processes come, right? Maxillary processes come like this, and they overgrow. The maxillary processes overgrow over the philtrum, and therefore, now today we are going to see what is behind the philtrum. What is there behind the philtrum? There are. If you take a cut section and this is the philtrum, this is the philtrum, then behind the philtrum is a structure like this, which is called as premaxilla. Premaxilla. हे बंद करूँगा, आपण नंतर परत रिवाइज करू त्यासाठी, तो व्हिडिओ डिलीट करू. There is a structure called as premaxilla. Then we said that maxillary processes come like this. ये maxillary processes है, दोनों जगह से आते, बराबर है? तो ये एक्चुअली अगर 3 डायमेंशन में देखा तो maxillary processes ऐसे आते. 3 डायमेंशन में देखेंगे तो maxillary processes ऐसे. ये maxillary processes है. बीच में फिल्ट्रम, फिल्ट्रम के पीछे, फिल्ट्रम के पीछे तुम्हारे बाजू की लड़की, फिल्ट्रम के पीछे क्या है? Premaxilla, also called as primitive palate. Also called as primitive palate. Okay. Now from the maxillary process, from these are the maxillary processes. From the maxillary process arise palatine process of maxilla. So what is this? Palatine process of maxilla. They arise. Palatine process of maxilla. And this palatine process firstly fuses with the premaxilla and then fuses with each other. Then fuses with each other. Then, so from this side one comes, other side other comes. Okay? So if I have to see this in another view, I would say this is premaxilla. Okay? Little behind, this is in a coronal section, for example. These are maxillary processes, and from where the palatine processes arise, they unite with each other. They are little behind. 2 palatine processes arise in a coronal section. They unite with each other. These are maxillary processes. Little behind, and anteriorly they come and unite with the premaxilla. Okay. Now there are multiple possibilities that can happen here. Multiple possibilities that can happen here. One, that these 2 palatine processes fail to fuse with each other, and they fail to fuse with the premaxilla. They fail to fuse with the maxilla. So then at that point, the person will have bilateral cleft lip, cleft palate. Bilateral cleft lip with cleft palate. Okay? Because maxillary processes have failed to fuse with each other, and they have also failed to fuse with the premaxilla. Anybody who has not understood till what I am talking? Premaxilla. हाँ. तुला ओरिएंटेशन आलं नाहीये का? हाँ. हा जो सेक्शन आहे ना, हा हॉरिझॉन्टल सेक्शन आहे. So this is anterior, this is posterior. So हमारा जो palate है ये posterior है. Palate anterior most triangular part behind the incisors, the 4 teeth. The 4 incisors are on the premaxilla. Frontonasal process मतलब ये filtrum के पीछे वो ये है प्रीमैक्सिला. ओके, फिल्ट्रम के पीछे. पैलेट डेवलप फ्रॉम प्रीमैक्सिला एंड पैलेटाइन प्रोसेसेस ऑफ मैक्सिलरी प्रोसेस व्हिच फ्यूज विथ ईच अदर, फ्यूज विथ प्रीमैक्सिला. So this is happening posteriorly. Then this hardens and some part does not harden, that becomes soft palate. Some part ossifies, some turns into a muscle. Now we are talking about possibility 1. These 2 maxillary processes which are coming from the 2 palatine processes which are coming from the maxilla fail to fuse with each other and premaxilla. So that time, last time also we had discussed the same thing. If maxillary process fails to fuse with the 2 medial nasal processes, we get either unilateral or bilateral. If 2 medial nasal processes fail to fuse with each other, we get a midline cleft lip. Right now we are talking about palate. Okay, so midline is when these 2 fail to fuse with each other. Lateral is when maxillary fails to fuse with medial nasal process. Okay? Possibility 2. The second possibility that this have fused, but on one side the fusion has not taken place. One side the fusion has not taken place. Okay, so what has happened is possibility 2 is unilateral cleft palate. Unilateral cleft palate. So here one side maxillary process has failed to fuse with the premaxilla. Maxillary process has failed to fuse with premaxilla and also with the other this thing. But other side, other maxillary process has fused with the premaxilla. So when maxillary process on one side fails to fuse with premaxilla or primitive palate, there is unilateral cleft palate. Now possibility number 3. Possibility number 3 is that they fuse with the premaxilla. The 2 maxillary processes fuse with the premaxilla, but they fail to fuse with each other. They fail to fuse with each other. Okay? So there is a midline cleft palate, but there is no cleft lip in such cases. Okay, when these things happen posteriorly, lip is not affected. When anteriorly it happens, normally cleft palate is associated with cleft lip also. When anterior fusion doesn't happen. Okay? So this is cleft, midline cleft palate. 4th possibility is that this fusion also happens, but only in posterior region the fusion doesn't happen. Only in posterior region the fusion doesn't happen. Posterior region the fusion doesn't happen, and this is cleft soft palate. Cleft soft palate. Okay, the hard palate is fused. So when posteriorly this fusion between 2 maxillary processes does not happen, it leads to cleft soft palate. Fifth possibility is that Fifth possibility is all these fusions happen. All these fusions happen. Even midline fusion also happens. Only terminal portion, the fusion doesn't happen. Terminal portion. That is called as bifid uvula. Uvula. Bifid uvula. Bifid uvula. Bifid uvula. Okay, so 5 possibilities happening, 5 types of cleft palate. Last time we had studied 3 possibilities of cleft lip. One, these two fail to fuse with each other, medial nasal processes, midline. Side mate doesn't happen, either unilateral or bilateral, and oblique facial cleft. When does oblique facial cleft happen, Narvekar? When lateral nasal process fails to fuse with maxillary. Maxillary process fails to fuse with lateral nasal process. Sorry. When maxillary process fails to fuse with lateral nasal process. So झालं का लिहून? आता व्यवस्थित कॅमेरा हातात घे. ओके, आणि 3, 2, 1 म्हणून चालू कर.
1, 2, 3 start.
So we are discussing the development of palate. We know that there are 2 medial nasal processes which fuse to each other with each other from philtrum. Now let us see what is behind the philtrum in a transverse section. In a transverse section, behind the philtrum is formed premaxilla, also called as the primitive palate. Okay, that is where our incisor, upper incisors are lodged. Now on the sides are maxilla, the developing maxilla. They send palatine process of maxilla. This palatine process of maxilla fuses with the premaxilla. It fuses with each other to form the palate. Posterior part does not ossify and forms the soft palate and uvula. Now let us see the 5 possibilities where that can happen, and developmental errors or embryological problems. The first is that the 2 palatine processes of maxilla fail to fuse with each other and also with the premaxilla. That time there will be bilateral cleft lip and cleft palate. Second possibility, one side premaxilla fuses with the maxillary process, other side then there will be unilateral cleft lip with cleft palate. Third possibility is that both the palatine processes of maxilla fuse with the premaxilla. They have fused with the premaxilla, but they have failed to fuse with each other. So that time there is a midline cleft palate. Okay, midline cleft palate. Fourth possibility is that the 2 fuse with each other anteriorly, but posteriorly they don't fuse with each other, and this leads to the cleft palate, cleft in the soft palate. Soft, because posterior part forms the soft palate. Last possibility is all the fusion happens. Anteriorly also there is fusion. In midline there is fusion. Posterior most tip, the fusion between the 2 palatine process of maxilla does not happen, and this leads to cleft uvula. So these are the 5 possibilities. Thank you. Okay, समझ
Start.
सो नाही ते बंदच कर आणि परत चालू कर.